Hi there Star Wars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video, and welcome to episode 145 of Ask Bossk Bounty. This is the weekly Q&A series that drops every Sunday, where I take your questions from the comment section below and do my very best to answer them for you. So if you do have a question for next week's episode and you want to be featured, leave it in the comment section below and hopefully you'll be picked for next week. We have a jam-packed episode once again this week. Loads of questions because so many questions were asked last week because of the giveaway. And I will be drawing that giveaway later on in the video as well. So be sure to check that out. But yeah, there's so many questions and I wanted to get through so many of them on this episode. So some of them will be quick fire answers, but others will be sort of a little bit more in depth. So if you do happen to enjoy the video, don't forget to drop a like down below. And I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody that did ask a question last week. So it really does help the video and everything. So thank you so much for that. And let's get straight on to the first question. Crystal Dragon Skull says, question for next week. With the relatively new rocket ankles on Stormtroopers, I really want to army build them, but I'm feeling a bit hesitant to get the 4-pack of them that doesn't have the new ankles. What do you think is the best way to army build the latest form of the Stormtrooper mold with the rocker ankles, and should I just wait for Hasbro to re-release the 4-pack with the rocker ankles? So I don't think we've got too much of a choice right now because the 4-pack I think is sold out. I don't think they're really producing that anymore, and so they shouldn't either. Now we've got that new one with the rocker ankles. That is the definitive Stormtrooper. We don't need that older Stormtrooper now. So Hasbro, please do not, carry on producing that one. What they need to do is do a new 4-pack with the rocker ankles, and that will sort everything out, and they need to make it more available than they did just on Hasbro Pulse. Apart from that, the only choice that you've got is to try and get as many of the Walmart exclusive, I think they're Walmart exclusives, of the A New Hope Cardback Stormtrooper, which is going to be pretty tricky to do, isn't it? Let's face it. So come on Hasbro, give us a new 4-pack with the rocker ankles. Tony J says, great vid as always. Question for next week. The Disney Droid Factory line seems to be filling in some blanks in the Vintage Collection lately. Which Disney Droid release would you like to see in the Vintage Collection? I'm partial to their fall-on, but wonder what others would translate well to TVC. Yeah, it does seem that way, doesn't it? That we're getting some of the droids in the Disney line, and it's, and we don't really know whether we're going to be getting those in the Vintage Collection. But I totally agree with you with Fall-On. This, for me, is the best Fall-On that we've got in 3 3/4. I've said that on a few occasions. But apart from that, I think you can't look really past their astromech droids. There's some really good astromech droids, both in the Mandalorian 4-pack and the most recent Obi-Wan 4-pack. This particular droid here came in that pack. He's awesome. But apart from that, these two here really stand out for me. Not forgetting Ned B, of course, which my son has already nicked off me, so I can't have him in the video. But yeah, the security droid from the prison episode and the gondola droid. This is awesome. I would love to see that on a Vintage Collection card back. That would be flipping awesome. So these two I think would translate quite well, but who knows if they're even allowed to do it. Maybe there's some deal or something where, some of the droids go to Disney parks, others Vintage Collection. Braddock843 says, hi Bossk, thanks for what you do for the TVC community. I heard the reason we don't have a Dooku in TVC is because of the likeness debate with Lucasfilm and his estate. Do you know anything about this, and has something similar ever happened before? Thanks. To be honest, I don't think that's going to be the case because we got the Black Series one a couple of years ago, didn't we? And that is like full on his likeness. So I really don't think so. I think Christopher Lee, died 2015, I want to say, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, as we've had that one in the Black Series, I don't think the likeness sort of licensing is an issue. I really don't. So I think, the fact that we haven't got him is just because they can't get him in the line at the moment, or there's not a reason for them to get him in the line. But a lot of fans have been calling for that figure, so maybe we'll get him in the future. Danny Allen says, great episode, BB. For next week, we have all seen Andor Han is pipeline, but why would they do this? It has the 1.0 return revenge cards and the new head sculpt reissue. Any insight on this upcoming Han? Part of a Rebel bunker playset, maybe? Thank you as always for all you do. Cheers, may the force be with you. So I don't have any insight apart from the fact that I'm pretty sure that he is a mainline figure. I think he's just coming out on his own card back in the main line. We don't know too much about the figure, whether he's going to be coming with his trench coat or whatever. But I think when you allude to that 1.0 version, I think a lot of fans, when he got reissued, were very, very disappointed that they brought that figure out again. It's an old sculpt of Han Solo. It desperately needs updating in terms of the body at least. So let's see what we get with that figure. I don't think it's going to be all new, apparently. It's just, so we'll just have to see what they do with it. Jesse Fleming says, great video as always. Question for next week. Outside of the Vintage Collection, which is your favourite line of Star Wars 3.75? Mine will always be the Power of the Force 2 line from the 90s. Definitely hasn't aged well, but I'll never forget being a kid and going into any store with toys and seeing the massive displays. Some of the best memories I've had of me and my mum revolve around collecting that line, especially the Snowspeeder, which was my pride and joy. Lots of positive thoughts to your friend. You're going to beat this, Glenn. Thank you so much, Jesse. I've got to say, you know, it's the original vintage line, because very much like you, I remember the days of going into the shops and seeing wall to wall of figures like this, for example. In terms of the modern era, I've got to say something like the Saga collection or the Legacy collection, just purely because of the diverse sort of characters that you've got and figures, you know, in those lines. Those were really good. Darth Wizzy Wizard says, hello Tim, what is your favourite card back? Prayers to your friend, mate. Hope he pulls through. Thank you, Darth. I've got to say that I've put these two here in front of you. I absolutely love this image of Vader, and I love the one that they've done in the Vintage Collection as well, taking that image, cleaned it up ever so slightly. It looks fantastic. And this one, the Luke Dagobah landing, has always been a favourite of mine. There's so many that I could pick, to be honest. The Cody card back, for example, is a great one. The Rogue One Stormtrooper is a really good card back. Really clear image of the Stormtrooper on that one. There's so many. The Death Trooper. But yeah, I've put those two there because they kind of stick out for me. Jedi Berry says, hi BB, with the anniversary of Return of the Jedi next year, what do you think the chances are of Hasbro making a Black Series Biker Scout helmet? Would be absolutely awesome if they did. Keep up the great work. I think that one is a dead cert, if I'm honest, and I think Yakface, Jason, over on his Instagram a few weeks ago, put a post out saying something along the lines of think of the most obvious helmet from the Return of the Jedi, and that's what's coming, basically. So you've got to sort of think that it's going to be the Biker Scout, and yeah, I think we're on to that one. David McFadden says, question for next week, what would you like the next army builder wave to be? And same goes for Little Bossk. Unfortunately, Little Bossk isn't here today. He's out with one of his friends, so he can't answer that, but I would imagine it would be like either the Ewoks or some kind of Mandalorian or something. Something to do with Boba Fett anyway. But myself, I think with the Return of the Jedi coming, I would like them to do the Rebel Commando. 4 different versions of that guy in a 4-pack would be perfect. Pokey says, do you think that same as Kenobi will get a Andor 3-pack of perhaps some of those Imperials like the Black Series just got? Well, I really do hope so, my friend, because otherwise Andor is going to be looking very thin on the ground in the Vintage Collection. We're getting 2 in the next wave because they're on the back of the card backs. We already know what they are. So unless there is going to be a 3-pack, I think we've got the Phase 2 clone coming next year. I think he'll be on a Andor card back. But apart from that, I don't really know of anything else that's coming. So we do need a 3-pack with some kind of, you know, like they always do with those figures, kit bashes maybe. Maybe they can somehow get those troopers out or something, I don't know. But they're going to have to do something, otherwise we're not going to have much for Andor at all. Phil the Fall says, hey Tim, question for next week. With the recent excellent Andor Black Series reveals of Imperial officers, I really think we'll be getting a few in the Vintage Collection. The Crowd Control officer in the black, in particular, looks just like a head swap, repaint away from the Migs Din Morak Juggernaut drivers. What you say? Thanks for all you do, man. Yeah, I'm in total agreement. As with the previous question, I think it was the, as you say, it's that control officer, isn't it, in the Black Series. I think that could be accomplished in the Vintage Collection quite easy for Hasbro, and maybe that is one of the figures that would be in one of those 3-packs or as an exclusive or something. Maybe that is the case, and we can only sort of keep our fingers crossed that, you know, that they're sort of thinking about Andor for the Vintage Collection, you know. Hot Toddy says, hey Bossk, question for next week. Have you ever mentioned to Hasbro in a Q&A your desire for the alternate photo card backs for the original 96 figures? Bespin Luke, Bespin Leia, Chewbacca, etc. I've always thought this was a no-brainer as they could potentially sell twice as many figures. It seems you and I are the only ones who feel the same about this. Well, I don't think we're the only ones that do. I know my mate Nick, Only One Kenobi, he's a big advocate for this as well. He would love those sort of alternate cards, and I'm definitely in that camp. At the end of the day, you know, it's about making the sort of collecting fun, and they did the foil cards, they did the revenge cards. Why not give us the alternate cards as well? You know, loose collectors do not need to buy these twice, and carded collectors, from my point of view, like this sort of thing. They like the different sort of variations of card backs and stuff like that, especially as those ones were in the original 96, but it's not something that I've actually mentioned on a Hasbro Q&A. I think that would be a better question to maybe ask them in person at a convention or something, and I really do hope somebody has, but maybe next year at Celebration we can pose that question. Darth Emmett says, do you get your TVC carded figures graded? If so, which ones? So I have had a few graded. The ones I tend to get graded are like the ones that come in exclusive packages or whatever. So for example, I got the Merrick graded. He got a 95 gold with UKG. I got him graded because obviously he's only available in the X-Wing, so that's kind of the reason why I did that one. Others that are, you know, potentially quite rare, like the Canadian Yoda, he's a 90. I got him graded. So it's kind of things like that. Ones that have come in play sets, the mini cards from the Revenge set, anything that might be a bit rare, I tend to get graded. I've also got a couple of them loose graded as well. So this is the Mandalorian from the Razor Crest. I got that all set up like that with all the weapons laid out. He got a U95 because they opened the baggie. So he's an uncirculated because they opened the baggie. And this got a U95 as well because I sent in a carded, you know, Boba Fett from the droids line, and they set the coin. I just thought that would look pretty smart, and I do love that. It's one of my favourite pieces actually in the collection. So, you know, a bit excessive to do this sort of thing, but I quite like them. Christopher Price says, thanks BB for all you do. Question for next week: how do you feel about repro accessories, especially those that are hard to find and buy on the secondary market? Mic stand like the Max Rebo band, Ewok staffs, etc. I personally wouldn't have them in my collection. I've managed to finish the 96 now, and I have, you know, all of the original weapons, so I'm quite fortunate in that position. However, I'm not one of those people that tell other people how they want to collect. If somebody wants repo weapons in their collection, then that's completely fine with me. It's got nothing to do with me. But in my own personal collection, I like to know that, you know, all the weapons that I have with my vintage figures are, you know, the original ones that came with them. Robert Lataley says, great videos always, BB. While it's great we are getting all these new original shows on Disney Plus, are you concerned that Hasbro will fall into a pattern with the vintage collection where they only give us a few figures per show, as they have done so far with the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi? While this would bring representation of every show in TVC, we also will never actually have a good collection from any show. This is definitely something I can see happening. Just wondering what you think. Thank you and keep up the great work. Yes, it is definitely an issue, 100%. I mean, if you look at the Obi-Wan Kenobi line, we've had 3 figures, one of them being Darth Vader, plus we've got a 3-pack on the horizon, that's 6. You know, we need more of the main characters from that show and some of the background characters as well. But I think, you know, Hasbro are in a bit of a sort of difficult position where, you know, they don't really know what the community wants in terms of, you know, do we want the original 96? Do we want figures from the original trilogy that have never been made before? Do we want new media, or do we just want them all? You know, and that is the problem that they've got. And I've actually put a poll up on my YouTube community page this morning, actually, based on this question, my friends. So after this video, be sure to go over to the community page on my YouTube channel and, you know, hit the vote. Tell us what you want, because I'm not saying Hasbro are going to see this, but if we can get enough votes, it gives a bit of an idea of what sort of the collectors want. So take a look at that poll after the video. All right then guys, so it's time to pick the winner of the giveaway. Thank you all so much for entering the competition. And this is for the Red 5 Designs book. So I'm going to place the URL into the comment picker here, and we're going to do fetch. And then what we're going to do is we're going to not allow the duplicates, and we're going to take out replies as well. So therefore everybody only has the 1 comment. So let's continue. And it has found 164 comments. Okay, so let's pick the winner. And it is Willis the Wizard, and he says, hi Tim, my question for next week is, when will the next HasLab project be, and do you think we'll get a new Darth Vader's TIE Fighter? Keep up with the great job you are doing. Thank you, Willis Wizard. Well, I'm hoping that the next HasLab would be announced at Puslecon. That seems to be the logical sort of time to do it. That's fingers crossed. Have to wait and see. And in terms of a new Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, that's definitely my #1 most wanted vehicle from the original trilogy in the Vintage Collection. But who knows on that front? Hopefully in some future series or something, like they did with Obi-Wan, where Vader is featured. Maybe we get to see his TIE Fighter in that, and then hopefully that'll help them do it. All right then guys, thank you so much for entering the competition, and we're going to get straight back onto the rest of the questions. Martin Baker says, question for next week. My question is, why do the companies making action figures, not just Star Wars but other lines too, not show all of the figures on the card backs anymore? I may not collect anymore, but I still look to see what's out in case something catches my eye. When I look on the card back, they only show 3 or 4 figures. However, the next figure on the peg was not shown and shows a few more new releases. I just find it frustrating. So I think the reason is, so like if we take the this Darth Vader here, this is a 77 back. Now the reason that they could put all these figures on the back like this is because they were always available in the shop. So for example, Dengar and Bossk they were put onto Return of the Jedi cardbacks. You could still get those figures. They were still being produced. Whereas a modern figure, if we take this one for example, you only get the 5 other figures there. And these figures, I believe, are all sort of in and around VC44. They're in that wave. And I think I've heard Hasbro say this before, is that, you know, they don't want figures being on the back that just are not going to be available. So on the back of, say, VC 230, you're not going to see VC 140, for example, because it's too long ago and they don't produce that figure anymore. So the person buying that figure is unable to pick up the ones that would be on the back. And I think that's the reason. So let me know in the comments if you think otherwise. Amanda Carrington says, question for next week, except for the vinyl cape Jiawa, what would be the next Holy Grail piece for you? Either an already made Kenner vintage collection or a total new figure. Well, I'm quite lucky actually, because I did pick up my sort of Holy Grail that I've wanted for years and years, and that was the Toxic Limbs Bossk. This is the Spanish POC Bossk, really, really rare, and you know, I'm very happy to have that in my collection. So after that, it's quite difficult to think about a Holy Grail. I think in terms of vintage figures, what I'm really looking for is other carded Bosks with different sort of offer stickers on them and stuff like that, just because I've got a bit of a Bossk focus, and I guess you can't really call them Holy Grails, but some of them are quite rare. So that's kind of what I'm going with in terms of vintage. Modern, there isn't really any Holy Grails that I'm after. I think I've got most of the sort of rarer stuff in the vintage collection, but you know, there's always something that's going to be coming out that I'll want. Lack Sivrak, hey there mate, he says, Mr. Bounty, question for next week, can you pull any strings and get us a Lack Sivrak figure? Respect to you, my friend. Unfortunately, I don't really have any strings that I can pull for that, but that figure, what was he the only one that we've got in the Power of the Force 2? Not a great looking figure these days, is it? That would be a great one, you know, if they were ever to do like the Cantina or something, that would be a great one for the vintage collection to do. So fingers crossed on that front, my friend. Auslander, I think that's how you pronounce your name. Question for next week, boss. With the Black Series make your own figure being teased on Hasbro Pulse, do you think there's a chance at vintage scale? I'm desperate to put myself in the Boosh disguise. That would be pretty cool. We'll have to see how they get on, you know, with the 6-inch line. I think that's the testing ground for them. Obviously, it's a lot easier for them to do the face sculpts and paint deco on those larger heads. But it would be something interesting to come to the vintage collection, wouldn't it? I mean, you know, having your head on a pilot's uniform or something. Interesting concept. I'm not really too sure what I think about it, to be honest. But yeah, I think they'll have to wait and see how it does in the, you know, in the bigger scale first. Randy S says, hey boss, question for next week. Can you drive manual transmission automobiles? Also motorcycles? Random question, I love it. Yes, I can drive a car. I think over in the UK, most people can. You can take a license where it's just automatic, but I don't think many people do. I think most people do the license where you can drive a manual, and then that automatically allows you to drive an automatic, basically. As for a motorcycle, I haven't driven one of those since I was about 18, so I wouldn't really trust myself on one now. RZG 1977 says, hi Tim, entertainment and informative video as usual. Question for next week. You have previously noted the reason for punched card retailers versus not punched direct. Do you have any insight as to why the playsets, which are sealed units, come with punched cards? Yeah, it's a bit frustrating that, isn't it, considering they sort of had them unpunched in the Razor Crest. But I think I remember one of the guys at Hasbro saying, you know, they were a bit worried about the punch falling out within one of those play sets. They're packed in a bit funny in there, aren't they? And maybe a piece of plastic could push it through or something like that. And I think the last thing they would want is people returning a whole play set just because their card has been punched. I think that's probably the reason, but it is frustrating. Garen Anderson says, hi boss, do you think the 40th anniversary of the Return of the Jedi, they could release a Vintage Collection HasLab Ewok Village? I feel like we are way overdue for another release. Thanks for all the great content you roll out weekly. Your videos are very informative. Thank you so much for the comment, my friend. I think the Ewok Village is one of those ones where, you know, you've got a lot of people that don't really like the Ewoks, but I think most people would want an Ewok Village. The original vintage one was pretty cool, but just think what they could do with one in the HasLab. I think they could make that really, really good. And we have also got lots of other stuff that could go with it in the vintage collection already, haven't we? And with the Return of the Jedi 40th anniversary, we're going to be getting a lot more stuff for Andor as well. So that would make sense, but we'll have to wait and see what they do. I think there's a lot of options for them to do with HasLab, and whatever they choose, there'll be some people that are happy and some people that are disappointed and saying, oh, you should have made this or whatever. So We'll have to wait and see, my friend. C3PO Concept says, great video. I did an OT rewatch this weekend and realised that Lando's costume at the final party of Return of the Jedi is not his main Return of the Jedi look. Surprisingly, I don't think it's ever been made as a figure. Besides the Tonica sisters, are there any never made OT characters or versions of that you'd like to see get their first figure? I'm going to be completely sort of predictable with this one, and it's got to be Velkin Tazeri for me. Finish that skiff, and also the other human skiff guards as well. If they're going to do one, maybe they can do the others. That would be my pick. Vote for Velkin. Brian Sanders says, love your video, boss. Question for next week. What do you think the chances are of Hasbro re-releasing some of the harder to find, more expensive Return of the Jedi TVC figures during the 40th anniversary? Specifically Weequay, Nikto and Lumat. Missed out on these originally. I would love Lumat because I don't have him loose at all, so that would be awesome. But I mean, Weequay I think is the most likely out of those three because he was put into that fan vote, and I think he did reasonably well. And they've already re-released Ahsoka from that fan vote, which didn't win. So, you know, judging by that, I think Weequay's the most likely. I can see them doing a reissue wave of Return of the Jedi figures next year. It makes sense, doesn't it? And we'll have to see who's included. Jeremy Sargent says, question for next week. With Hasbro Pulsecon around the corner, 1, what reveals are you hoping to see? 2, do you think, like the previous Pulsecons, there will be a HasLab announcement? And a live stream for Ask Boss Bounty 150 would be great, and an opportunity to discuss Pulsecon reveals. Yeah, it will. Yeah, I think it will be pretty cool. So what am I hoping to see? I'm hoping to see some of the Return of the Jedi stuff. That would be nice. I'm hoping to see them reveal the Artillery Trooper and the 2 Andor figures, and maybe some more Andor figures in like a 3-pack or whatever. That would be ideal. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they do announce a HasLab for the Vintage Collection as well. It's about time, and as I've said previous questions, there's so many things that could potentially be. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping to see, and we'll just have to wait and see what they do. Hopefully there's lots for the Vintage Collection. Chris Rook says, okay, this is my 3rd time trying this, so hopefully I'll get some kind of response other than a thumbs up. I do apologise, mate. I've just got so many questions to pick from, and I do like to at least acknowledge that you've asked a question. So after noticing that it seems like they are releasing Jabba's Palace in parts over time, i.e. the Walmart exclusive Jabba's with Throne, with the wall with Han in Carbonite, and now the Throne Room, what would you think if they did something like that with the Mos Eisley Cantina or Death Star and making them Pulse exclusives, giving us 1 or 2 parts a year to complete huge and extremely detailed playsets that also can be used as display devices. Each part could come with a figure to help complete the set needed to complete the playset. I would really love to hear your thoughts on this as well as others. Thanks, Bossk. Well, I think when we look at the 2 Jabba items, I think those 2 are separate to each other. I think when the original one came out, Hasbro in one sort of mind about playsets, and then this one is, you know, in between, like nearly a HasLab item. I think it may have even been discussed as a HasLab item originally. I don't like the idea of Pulse exclusivity because that doesn't allow everybody in the world to access that, so that's a bit annoying, but it seems like that is the way that they're going to go. But in terms of the crux of your question, in terms of, you know, would I want items in parts, I'm not too sure about the Cantina. I think I'd want the Cantina to be one big thing that we got, you know, like the Jabba's Throne Room, but bigger, as a HasLab maybe. The Death Star's a little bit different. I think if you were to do a whole Death Star playset for HasLab, it would be huge. It would be absolutely massive because there's so many sections that you could create a scene in, you know. So maybe that would be one that they could do, you know, here's the trash compactor, here's the briefing room, you know, here's the sort of hangar where Obi-Wan fought or whatever. You know, there's so many different things that they can do. Here's the detention center corridor and that sort of thing. So the Death Star might be a better idea for doing it that way. But that's really my thoughts on it. I think the Cantina I'd want that as a whole thing. But yeah, hope that answers your question, Chris, and thanks for watching, my friend. Alright then guys, that's it for this week's episode 145 of Ask Boss Bounty. Thank you so much for watching, and if you do have a question for next week's episode, please leave it in the comment section below and hopefully I'll get round to answering your question. There was a lot of questions that I couldn't fit into this week's episode, which are awesome questions. If you want to repeat those to be answered next week, feel free to do so. Congratulations to the winner of the giveaway as well. That book will be on its way to you. Please contact me on social media and you know, we'll get the address and everything for that to be sent to. I want to say a big thank you to my Patreon supporters and channel members. Your support means a great deal to me, and the Discord server that I've got running for you guys, the exclusive Discord server, is great. You know, everyone's sort of talking in there. It's a brilliant place to hang out, so thank you for making that so great as well. Alright then guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and we shall see you on the next one.